I wouldn't be surprised that both President Putin and President Xi would themselves be very happy to have the United States of America pulling on the same side of the tug of war.
Welcome again to yet another episode here on Essential Media. If you are new here, kindly subscribe, like, and share. In this explosive episode of Lumumba, Professor P.L.O. Lumumba unpacks the rising global tension as Russia's President Vladimir Putin prepares to meet China's Xi Jinping, while Donald Trump issues fresh threat of sanctions and tariffs after renewed Russia attack on Ukraine. We are going to see the strategic alliance between Russia and China, also why Africa is central to global power shift. Also in this episode, don't miss how Trump's pressure on Putin could spark new Cold War. Also, we are going to look at what the West fears about multipolarity and Eastern strength. Why Pan-African diplomacy is needed in the new world order. The strategic alliance between Russia and China. The alignment between Russia and China is best described as a partnership of strategic coordination rather than a formal alliance. While not a strict military alliance, it involves close cooperation across political, economic, and military domain, with both countries coordinating their actions to encounter Western influence and promote a multiple world order. This partnership is characterized by non-alignment, non-confrontation, and lack of targeting any third party. These are the key aspects of the partnership. First, political alignment. Both countries share a desire to challenge the perceived dominance of the United States and its allies, promoting a more multipolar global order. They cooperate within international organizations like the UN Security Council and often aligning their votes and stances. Second, the military cooperation. Now, China has become a key enabler for Russia's defense industry, particularly since the war in Ukraine, providing crucial support and technology. The cooperation strengthens both countries' defense capability and presents a counterweight to Western influence. Let's see the economic ties. The partnership has fostered closer economic ties with increased trade and investment between the two nations. They are also exploring alternatives to Western-dominated financial systems, such as BRICS Pay, as seen with the new development bank and contingent reserve arrangement. Non-alignment and non-confrontation. This is also a key principle of the partnership. It is a non-aligned nature, meaning it doesn't aim to target any specific country or group of countries. This contrasts with traditional military alliance, which often involves clear commitment to mutual defense. Challenges and divergences. While the partnership is strong, there are also areas of potential divergence and competition. China, for example, has its own regional interest in Asia, while Russia focuses on its sphere of influence in the former Soviet republics. In essence, the Russia-China partnership is a complex and involving relationship with significant implications for global power dynamics and international relations.
The 3rd day of September, the year 2025, something that is unique will happen. The Russians and the Chinese will have a meeting. And that meeting will be iconic in the sense that in the minds of many commentators, it is designed not only to demonstrate the camaraderie between the Russians and the Chinese, but also to send an unequivocal message, particularly to the West, as led now quite actively by President Macron of France and Prime Minister Steinmeier of the United Kingdom, that there is a counterweight to the European attempt at retaining their hegemony in international relations. And I think this must be understood in the context that the world is progressively moving towards multipolarity. But the Western world is taking the view that that multipolarity is not a good thing, their rhetoric notwithstanding. And therefore, when it is seen that the Russians and the Chinese are becoming a lot more intimate in terms of their collaboration, I think a few things arise. One, Russia is a nuclear power. China is a nuclear power. And China is the second largest economy in the world. In fact, we can now say that China has become the factory of the world in terms of manufacturing, and it is a power that is beginning to project politically, economically, and even militarily. And it is acquiring new friends through soft power within the Asian region, within the Pacific region, and as far as the continent of Africa and Latin America. Russia is also moving in that direction, that in addition to being a political powerhouse within its neighborhood, there is a sense in which even its economy, which it was assumed would be devastated by the sanctions, appear to be weathering this.
So why Africa is central to global power shift? Africa is becoming increasingly central to global power shift due to its rich natural resources, growing digital infrastructure, large population, and strategic location. The continent's potential as a key player in the global economy and its role in addressing climate change are also significant factors. Let's break down the detail why Africa is gaining prominence. First, natural resources. When we look at Africa's natural resources, Africa is abundant in critical minerals and other resources vital for the green transition and technological advancement. These include minerals like cobalt, lithium, and rare gases, which are also essential for batteries, electric vehicles, and other technologies. Furthermore, Africa has significant oil and gas reserves, as well as potential for solar and geothermal energy. Second is demographic dividend. Africa has a young and rapidly growing population, representing a large and potential productive workforce. This demographic shift can fuel economic growth and innovation, making the continent a key market and source of labor. Third is strategic location. The continent's location also makes it a key player. Africa's geographic position at the crossroads of major trade routes, particularly for shipping and logistics, makes it strategically important for global trade and connectivity. The continent's location also makes it a key player in region and global security. Fourth, let's look at climate change. Africa's vulnerability to climate change and its potential for renewable energy development makes it a critical partner in addressing the climate crisis. The continent's vast solar potential and other renewable energy resources position it to become a leader in the global energy transition. We are still looking at why Africa is central to global power shift. Let's look at growing digital infrastructure. So Africa is experiencing a rapid growth in digital infrastructure, including internet connectivity and mobile phone usage. This growing digital landscape is attracting investment and creating new opportunities for economic development and innovation. The rise of the African Continental Free Trade Area. This union, the world's largest free trade area, has the potential to boost intra-African trade, creating jobs and accelerating economic growth. This initiative positions Africa as a more integrated and powerful economic bloc. Geopolitical competition. Major global powers are increasingly focused on Africa due to its resources, strategic location, and potential for economic growth. This has led to increased competition for influence and partnerships in the continent. Eighth, at the challenges and opportunities. So while Africa holds an immense potential, it also faces challenges such as poverty, inequality, and political instability. Successfully navigating these challenges and harnessing the continent's resources and human capital will be crucial for shaping the future of global power. That is Africa.
Chinese alliance is something that I think must worry the West, which begs the question, what is the source of concern? The source of concern must be seen in the context of the fact that as all this is happening, the major European powers are losing their grip. France is losing its grip. In fact, they surrendered their last military outpost in Africa, in Dakar, in Senegal, and they have lost quite a number of their allies in French West Africa. And even La Côte d'Ivoire, which continues to be an ally, they are beginning to receive hostility from the populace. The British are also finding themselves in a similar situation, that the Commonwealth, which they call the Commonwealth of Independent Nations, is a body that is weakening by the day. And we see that even within the United Kingdom itself, there are internal contradictions in the Union. So these are powers, namely the United Kingdom and France, which are losing their grip. The sun is setting on their empires, and they are becoming desperate and fearful, particularly because their populations are also aging, and in many ways their economies are not as vibrant as they ought to be. Another player that must not be ignored in that context is Germany, because Germany in this situation is also beginning to project her power, and is doing so in a very clever way through its organization known as the GIZ. You now find them with footprints across the world and in the continent of Africa, engaging in what is referred to as soft power. So all these factors conjoined must make Europe very worried that how do we deal with a China that is progressively becoming very sophisticated, and is not just trade of goods and services. Look at their military, look at their engagement in the area of cybernation, in the area of artificial intelligence, in the aviation industry, and all these things which define the fourth and fifth industrial revolution. And if then they have more friends, then it is worrying worrying Europe, and must be a source of concern. And the other thing that must worry Europe in this context is the proxy war that is being prosecuted in Ukraine. That to the extent that the war does not appear to be going according to script, to the extent that the war appears to be going on, to the extent that the United States of America is ambivalent as to how it will behave. It must be remembered that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, was very clear in the early days of his presidency, saying that Europe must now take care of its bills within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And we have seen how they have tried to improve their expenditure in the UK, in France, and in Germany. And you have in the United States of America a government that is not as clear as to whether it would cast its lot with Europe. And I remember at one time President Trump, in his quest to ensure that he brokered peace between Ukraine and Russia, reminded Europe that there is a big, beautiful ocean between Europe and the United States of America.
Another key point that we need to look up is how Trump's pressure on Putin could spark new Cold War tensions. So a head-on collision seems unavoidable. Declared tabloid Moscovici commensurate recently, the Trump locomotive and Putin locomotive are speeding towards each other, and neither is about to turn off or stop and reverse. For the Putin locomotive, it's full steam ahead with a so-called special military operation, Russia's war in Ukraine. The Kremlin leader has shown no desire to end hostilities and declare a long-term ceasefire. Meanwhile, the Trump locomotive has been accelerating efforts to pressure Moscow into ending the fight, announcing deadlines, ultimatums, threat of additional sanctions against Russia, and hefty tariffs on Russia's trading partners like India and China. And all of that, the 2 U.S. nuclear submarines which President Trump claims is repositioned closer to Russia. So when you switch from talking about locomotives to nuclear subs, you know things are serious. But does that mean the White House is well on the collision course with the Kremlin over Ukraine? Or is it a visit to Moscow this week by Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, a sign of the posturing a deal between Russia and America to end the fight is still possible? That is a question for another day.
Hold the view that the Russo-Chinese alliance is sending shivers, and I want to imagine that the diplomatic fronts are being worked, metaphorically speaking, on a daily basis. But as we have learned during the short term of the second coming of the presidency of President Trump, the only predictable thing about Trump is unpredictability. He does not say what he is going to do, whether it will be another tariff regime, whether it will be a new sanction regime, whether it will be supplying long-range missiles to Ukraine, whether it will be supplying more Patriot missiles to Ukraine, whether it is going to be more sanctions on the officials from Russia. Nobody knows, and anybody who pretends to know is swimming into the shark-infested waters of speculation. But that does not stop us from building scenarios. And scenario number one to me is that possibly as we speak now, the administration of President Trump is doing everything within its power to engage President Putin and to engage President Zelensky, that there is a wisdom in having something as an armistice or a modus vivendi in the style of South and North Korea. So that once you have an operational modus vivendi and armistice, then it will freeze things and then negotiations can begin to happen. With the understanding as a quid pro quo on the part of Ukraine that we will freeze your application to join the European Union or NATO. That is scenario number one. Scenario number two is that Ukraine becomes very intransigent because of the encouragement of France and Germany and the United Kingdom, and says that as a condition precedent to any kind of ceasefire, the territories currently occupied, including Crimea, must be returned. And if that is the position that is taken, I want to believe that Russia will not play ball, particularly on the basis of the arguments that are in the public domain.
What the West fear about the multipolarity and Eastern strength. The Western apprehension regarding multipolarity and the rise of Eastern power stems from a perceived loss of dominance in the global order and an increased potential for instability. Multipolarity with multiple power centers challenges the established Western-led liberal international order, potentially leading to a more competitive and unpredictable world. The shift in economic and political power towards the East, particularly China and the other BRIC nations, raises concern about the erosion of Western influence and emergence of an alternative global governance structure. Let's break them down. First, loss of dominance and influence. Shift power dynamics. The West, traditionally the dominant force in global affairs, sees its influence waning as other regions, particularly in East, experience rapid economic and political growth. Challenges to the liberal order. The rise of multipolarity challenges the Western-led liberal international order, which emphasizes democracy, free markets, and multilateral institutions. Illusion of Western hegemony. The West fears that multipolarity could lead to a more fragmented and contested world order, where its ability to set the agenda and enforce its values is diminished. Second is the increased competition and instability. Strategic competition. Multipolarity is often associated with increased strategic competition among major powers as they vie for influence and resources. Potential for conflict. Some analysts argue that multipolarity can increase the risk of conflicts as multiple actors pursue their interests without a clear hegemon to restrain them. Diversification of interest. The rise of regional powers with their own distinct agendas can lead to a more complex and unpredictable international landscape, making it harder to achieve collective action on global challenges. Third is concern about specific actors. Let's look at China's rise. China's growing economic and military power, coupled with its vision of multipolar world, is a particular source of concern for the West. BRICS nation. The expansion of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and their potential to challenge the US dollar's dominance through alternative financial system also raises concerns. Russia's assertiveness. Russia's action in Ukraine and its challenge to the existing international order are seen as a further evidence of a multipolar world order in which Western influence is contested. Fourth, let's look at need for adaptation, rethink, and strategies. The West is facing the challenge of adapting to a multipolar world by rethinking its foreign policy strategies and seeking new ways to engage with rising powers. Building partnership. Western leaders are recognizing the need to build partnership and alliances with other countries to address global challenges and maintain stability in a multipolar world, promoting cooperation. Despite the challenges, there is a growing recognition that cooperation among all major powers is essential to address global issues such as climate change, pandemics, and economic instability.
In the minds of many commentators, it is designed not only to demonstrate the camaraderie between the Russians and the Chinese, but also to send an unequivocal message, particularly to the West, as led now quite actively by President Macron of France and Prime Minister Steinmeier of the United Kingdom, that there is a counterweight to the European attempt at retaining their hegemony in international relations. And I think this must be understood in the context that the world is progressively moving towards multipolarity. But the Western world is taking the view that that multipolarity is not a good thing, their rhetoric notwithstanding. And therefore, when it is seen that the Russians and the Chinese are becoming a lot more intimate in terms of their collaboration, I think a few things arise. One, Russia is a nuclear power. China is a nuclear power. And China is the second largest economy in the world. In fact, we can now say that China has become the factory of the world in terms of manufacturing, and it is a power that is beginning to project politically, economically, and even militarily. And it is acquiring new friends through soft power within the Asian region, within the Pacific region, and as far as the continent of Africa and Latin America. Russia is also moving in that direction, that in addition to being a political powerhouse within its neighborhood, there is a sense in which even its economy, which it was assumed would be devastated by the sanctions, appear to be weathering the storm. And it is acquiring new friends or strengthening existing friendships. And we have seen that with their presence in the Sahelian region, their presence in Central African Republic, their presence in Sudan, their presence in different parts of Latin America.
Why Pan-African diplomacy is needed in the New World Order. So Pan-African diplomacy is crucial in the New World Order because it fosters unity, strengthens Africa's global influence, and promotes shared development goals. By acting as a unified bloc, African nations can better address challenges, negotiate from a position of strength, and shape the global agenda to better reflect their interests. Let's break them down. First, collective bargaining power. A unified Pan-African approach allows African nations to negotiate from a stronger position on issues like trade, climate change, and international security. Instead of individual nations being pitted against each other or being easily overlooked, they can present a united front, increasing their leverage in global forums. Second, that we need to say is addressing shared challenges. Now, many challenges facing Africa, such as conflicts, poverty, climate change, are regional or continental in nature. Pan-African diplomacy provides a framework for addressing these issues, collectively sharing resources and coordinating strategies. Third, let's look at promoting economic development. Pan-Africanism can drive economic integration and development by fostering trade, investment, and infrastructure projects across the continent. This can lead to a greater economic growth, job creation, and improved living standards for all Africans. Fourth, that we need to look at why Pan-African diplomacy is needed in the new world order is promoting economic development. Promoting economic development, fourth, is countering external influence. By strengthening intra-African cooperation and diplomacy, African nations can reduce their dependency on external actors and promote a more equitable global order. This includes resisting neo-colonial tendencies and promoting African solutions for African problems. Fifth is fostering a sense of unity and identity. Pan-African diplomacy strengthens the bond between Africans on the continent and in the diaspora, fostering a sense of shared identity and common purpose. This can be a powerful force for positive change, empowering Africans to shape their own destiny. So in the essence, Pan-African diplomacy is not just about political coordination. No. It's about building a stronger, more united, and more prosperous Africa that can play a leading role in the global arena. So as we wind up this episode, remember, Professor Lumumba shares the knowledge about the rising global tension as Russia's Vladimir Putin prepares to meet China's Xi Jinping in September, while Donald Trump issues fresh threats of sanctions and tariffs after renewed Russia attacks on Ukraine. So what does this mean for Africa, for global peace, for the future of Western dominance? Lumumba unpacks all this. Let's have a look at them.
Will tank up. So I think it is a scenario that one does not want to imagine. Of course, as it is now, they always speculate that they think China is supporting Russia, but they have not come out explicitly to say we are now with Russia. And they have, of course, as you've seen on a number of occasions, tried to say diplomacy is the only avenue that is desirable. So it would be a game changer. And when I listen to the rhetoric of the United States as evident through President Trump, actually is indicative of what he wants to do. I don't want to engage in battle with Russia. One can always read that, but I may be misreading, but I suspect I'm reading right. That I'm giving the opportunity for this thing to be resolved. Remember, even when he says, I thought that this war would end very quickly, and then it didn't end very quickly, but he says that I still have a good conversation with President Putin, which means he believed that Putin is a person that he can do business with. And Trump is a master at transactional politics. What is in it for the United States of America, which is underlined by that slogan, making America great again. And if in his interpretation, making America great again is to abandon Europe to its own design, I am not sure that he will not do it. The Europeans had better be very clever in this regard. And when I talk about the Europeans in real terms, you are talking about the UK, you are talking about France, and you are talking about Germany. The rest will play the gooseberry, or will be very ambivalent, or blow hot and cold. Is there indeed a line between political games and power? Is it not just one word for the same thing? But in order to, I see what you are trying to say, that what we are saying is that when you play politics, sometimes China presents itself as non-threatening, almost weak at times. But I think that is a strategy. China has discovered that in order to get into spaces, you don't need to show arrogance. You don't need to project raw power, that you can be strong and powerful in a very silent way. And you can see their diplomacy, almost velvet, iron fists in velvet gloves. And I think it is very effective In the Republic of Kenya recently, when a survey was conducted, 71% of those who were surveyed said that they preferred China to the United States. And how are they projecting this? By being involved in things that touch people's daily lives. They are involved in infrastructure development. They are involved in offering scholarship for people to go and learn in China. They are opening Confucius Institutes in major universities of Africa at a time when the Americans are withdrawing their support through USAID, and the Europeans are following suit. But by reduction of what they call aid, the Chinese are coming. They are saying, we are not even giving you aid. You are just good friends and brothers. Of course, that is not always true, that they are giving it for nothing. There is something in it for them. But that non-threatening approach is what is endearing China as a country to different parts of the world. Not only in the continent of Africa, but you can see it even in Latin America, you can see it in Asia, and you can see the meetings, and you can see the reactive diplomacy. When you see the Americans reacting and having meetings with the Japanese, having meetings with the South Koreans, having meetings with the Filipinos, it is in reaction to the soft diplomacy of the Chinese, which has seen them engage with different parts of people in that neighborhood in the Pacific region. You saw only recently the meeting with the Chinese with the Australians. So it's interesting. There are too many moving parts in this machine called the world, and one can only wait and see, even as the parts continue to move, sometimes in an apparently uncoordinated manner, but coordinated nevertheless. You know, on the 3rd day of September, many things could happen. And I'm one who believes that in international diplomacy, you never say never. And, Trump loves the big stage. And that stage will be large. So if he appears there even for just 1 hour and is part of the photo op and part of the interview that follows, it will be part of his making America great again by having this association with the leading powers in the world, militarily, Russia and China. So never say never. I wouldn't be surprised that both President Putin and President Xi would themselves be very happy to have the United States of America pulling on the same side of the tug of war, so that you leave it to the Europeans to do their act and to really, as it were, lick their wounds as former colonizers. So it's a possibility, and is one that I would myself and many people would love to see, in order to reset international diplomacy and international engagements. You know, the world is in a very interesting space after the World War. You know, the World War II was an occasion for the unquestioned emergence of the U.S. as the hegemon, militarily, economically, so that when the UN is created in San Francisco in 1945, is also a statement that we are the Alpha and Omega. When the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank and the IMF, and later the WTO came into the play, and Europe is helping in the reconstruction rather America is helping in the reconstruction of Europe. America is really the nation. And when they start engaging in different parts of the world after the Nixon presidency with the American Peace Corps, most of whom we knew were also spies, and then of course they are present in terms of organizations such as USAID. America is present everywhere. In health, in education, American cultural centers are being built. I think After the collapse of the Soviet Union in the year 1989 and the reunification, they are actually more energized as a unipolar world, and America remains the hegemon with the Europeans as the lapdog of the United States of America. But something has happened. And there is a book which is very beautiful in terms of defining the rise of China from Deng to Xi. Within 30 years, China quietly, silently has emerged as an economic power. And when that has happened and it has become the second largest economy in the world, replacing Japan and of course leaving the Germans in their wake, then it has redefined many things. And see the Chinese rise not only as traders in the economy. Look at their presence in artificial intelligence. Look at their presence now in the aviation world with their new aircraft. Look at them now beginning to project military power and having military bases outside of their neighborhood. And look at the intimate relationship that they now have with Russia. In other words, the world is moving towards multipolarity. And that multipolarity is one that has seen the weakening of Europe, so that Europe is losing her spheres of influence. European countries are losing their spheres of influence throughout the world, and they are desperate. And the Americans are also losing their grip in critical areas. See, with the coming into power of President Trump and the disbandment almost of the USID. So they are leaving room, and the vacuum that they are leaving is being occupied now. Occupied by the Chinese, occupied by the Russians, and even there are new pretenders in the bloc that are coming into these spaces from the Arab world. The Emiratis and the Qataris and even Turkey are coming into these spaces. So what I see is multipolarity, the emergence of BRICS, with Brazil being a dominant economy in South America. All these are redefining the world, and with the Trump's anti-immigration law, you can also see that even old friends are ruffled. Mexico and Canada are ruffled, and countries that would ordinarily just agree with the United States of America unquestioningly, such as Australia, you can see their prime minister very happy to meet the prime minister of China. So this multipolarity is, in my view, what is going to define the future of the world. It may be messy, but ultimately we'll pick the pieces when we are done with each other. But I think we are in a very messy period where many people are thumping their chests, and many countries are thumping their chests and are no longer fearful. In other words, there is a beautiful saying amongst the Twi in Ghana